new office of homeless services in Nashville. We are about 7 months or 8 months old now. Prior to July 1, we were a part of Metro, snuggled under Metro Social Services, and not having our own office and our own department to lead the efforts on homelessness in Nashville. So some people in Nashville thought of that as an afterthought. So it was very transformative for us to move into our own office. We are actually the HMIS lead, the coordinated entry lead, and newly becoming the collaborative applicant lead in Nashville. We also have a robust amount of services. There's that R word, I know. I didn't think I used it that often. We have a robust plethora of resources. We have 2 of our outreach team members here with us today, Lakeisha and Heather. We also have, outside of HMI's coordinated entry, we have the landlord engagement team, and we work closely with the collaborative applicant, the entire COC. So most all of the committees are led by our department as well. I'm also wanting to give thanks to another CAB member, April Burns-North.
Hey! That's me.
For traveling here with us.
Yes.
So a lot of great stuff going on in Nashville. Your bio seems really important when you're writing it, and then when you're about to talk about yourself, none of that seems important anymore. So I do want to say that as a brand new department, the work didn't stop for us. The work didn't stop. As a brand new department, we still had to continue with HMIS, coordinated entry for the entire community. We also was deeply invested in helping the collaborative applicant role move to our department. But meanwhile, we're still addressing unsheltered encampments, unsheltered homelessness, sheltered homelessness. Just want to say that the robust list of services that we have and the team that we built to help operate and run the Office of Homeless Services is what has helped us to be able to continue to build this plane as we're flying it. We're currently working on our mission, vision, goals, and strategies, or else you would see all of that listed in my bio as well, but we're working on that. What we do know is most everyone in this room and everyone on our team and everyone that participates in CAB is called here to help address, end, eradicate, reduce, eliminate homelessness. So thank you all for having us.
So altogether, we thought it was really important that we just ask some questions that kind of align the work that the CAB is doing in the community and how the homeless services can support it and how Bill can resource it. And we're going to ask Bill some real questions about how can you resource it. So that's really phenomenal, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to first ask Kenitha if you can name some spaces in Nashville where persons with lived expertise convene and are important places to build up voices and make these spaces good places for engagement around building power.
Okay, so actually, and I'm going to save the last one, which is homeless newspaper vendor space, because it's a purpose behind that one. We just had our first CAB meeting at The Contributor, which is a street vendor newspaper, so I'm going to save that for last. But I went to something the other day, and I actually, after my event, I went to the laundromat just to do laundry, right? I discovered people were living there. And, you know, I'm like, whoa, I see what I'm seeing here. And when I went in the building, I knew coming from outside, it was warm in there from the dryers. So I'm like, oh, they're, you know, getting warm. But I noticed where the laundromat locked the door to the bathroom, so they couldn't use the bathroom. A lot of places do that. And then they didn't have any plugs where they could plug up their phones or anything. So it just was this group of people, another group of people that had got their food for the night, and they were just kind of hanging out in the laundromat. And it looked like, to me, honestly, to be safe, you're not able to go to sleep. You know, just to be able to watch your back with that. So that's a new place that I have discovered. I didn't even know that until I literally witnessed it late night in a 24-hour laundromat. So that's how kind of when we're on the ground, we go into places, especially with that lived experience, you can see certain things that you normally probably wouldn't even notice. But car fulls of families in Walmart parking lots, that is a huge thing. My husband and I, we were actually homeless. We were going to pick up one of his coworkers, and we witnessed the parking lot full of cars with families with foggy windows, because you knew they were, again, trying to stay warm. But again, we know Walmart used to be 24/7. This was kind of pre-pandemic. And it seemed like before that they started closing earlier, and I feel like it was to block the families from being able to use the facilities, because they started becoming an epidemic before it was even the pandemic. Many prevention instances that are not connected to services because of the disconnect in communities on the ground. I feel like to prevent it, it saves to save housing. It saves money to save housing. And so retaining versus having to pay more to rehouse, including very expensive trauma-wise, people feel forgotten and they don't trust social services when we overstand because of the empathy and living it too. We know the problems, we know the need, we know how to collectively name our needs and the solutions with the relationship between National Alliance to End Homelessness, Mr. Albert, the CAB, and Office of Homeless Services forward facing. And I want to say with the homeless vending newspaper, actually still this morning, I was hearing from the Office of Homeless Services team to all of us of how much that meeting was just so, it was different for us. It was different than the first time we met as the CAB, and now that it's revamped, it's like we came back together with the family of people that we needed to connect with. And then we heard from the people, and I've always felt this way, the homeless community is super smart. And I feel like they are jewels that are waiting to be extracted. And I feel like it's up to us as lived experience to do that extracting and that cultivating of them and instilling what we already empathize with back into them and pour into them and build them up. Honestly, I feel like I saw that on that film by Invisible People with the Finland project they did. I saw how they were pouring back into the people and doing different things to make Housing First maximize. So that's where I see the people on the ground, out in the community, and the pulse of everything. So
awesome, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We're going down to April. Sure.
I just want to share on what Kanisha just said. We have to be innovative. We have to pivot. And we've been doing the same thing for the last 2 years, off and on, off and on, off and on. Yeah. And then we realized we have to go where the people are. And so when you talk about taking CAB to the contributor breakfast, that's where over 100 street paper vendors greet and meet each other, maybe every other week, twice a month, to get their new papers. And the very first time we went, they had no idea that we were offering gift cards if they were to stay. They had no idea that what they were going to learn or how their voices was going to be used during that instance. And so for us, I think that was a powerful moment for our CAB team to step outside of themselves, not expect people to come to them, and to actually embed themselves where the people are. And it was a very powerful moment. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
it was.
Awesome. I think this leads right into this question here, April, for you. How does Nashville Homeless Service System build trust, gain commitment, and live up to its promise to support persons with lived experience in those spaces and kind of ignite relationship building?
So working for local government, right? We know. Sometimes it's very difficult to build trust because people oftentimes think that you have an alternative agenda. And for us, our entire team, we are embedded in this work. We have about 6 people with lived experience, or back then, I think we have 5 now with lived experience on our team. We take pride in hiring people that are experts in that space and that can speak on their own. And so we also have included a COC manager to our team. She actually goes to all of the committee meetings. She supports Kanitha. She is the one that drafts the minutes. They're readily available for the entire community. And I think that to start it off, Albert, he just doesn't know it. He talked a little about how he's working with us. He just did not explain how at last year's conference, he was a spotlight speaker. And while we were sitting in the audience, I was like, we need that in Nashville. We need that in Nashville. So after he walked off stage, I ran out and stalked him down, right? Because I said, we need you in Nashville. And he said, you just name it. And ever since then, even without an MOU, even without payments, just because Metro's super slow, he has embedded himself in the work. And so we always talk about the consultants that we bring on. We have Ben here from SHK Consulting from New Orleans. And we have worked closely with HUD TA, and I'm happy to say that Albert is a part of our leadership team. And we share that, we share the work that's going on. None of this is a secret. I like to say we're doing this work and we're living out loud publicly so that everyone can see. Even with some of the best intentions, I think that sometimes there's still things that maybe go unheard or unstated or, confused. And so the only way to address that is to be where the people are, let them see your heart, have face-to-face verbal conversations. I don't live behind a keyboard because the emails overwhelm me, but too many of them. But I don't live behind a keyboard. I like to be where people are. When we're addressing encampments, we actually leadership. We actually walk there. We hired a team, SHK consultant team, that actually embeds themselves in that space with us. One thing that when I think about the places that we go as a department, how do we help CAB help us lead the way in that space? And that's what we're working with Albert and Tamika and April on.
Yes.
Awesome. Bill, this question's for you. Explain the role of your office and its collaboration with the Office of Homeless Services and with the people with lived expertise, and how do you start identifying how and when to make investments specifically in the work with people with lived experience, and what's the process around that?
Thanks, Albert. As April indicated, our department is fairly new, and it's dedicated solely to the sole purpose of ending homelessness in Nashville. There's no other reason. That's what we do. And we were the HMIS lead, CE lead, but we are, transitioning into the collaborative applicant lead. And as we have worked with the outgoing collaborative applicant lead, which is the Public Housing Authority, we've been, gained greater insight into that role, the funding that's involved in that role, and then, we're looking at the COC planning grant and the funds that are associated with that. This year was a little under $400,000. And since all of our salaries are paid out of the department budget, that just frees up all that money to invest back into the community, which is we're really excited about. So beyond that, HUD technical assistants, who we're working with very closely, providing guidance to our COC to enrich the space around people with lived experience and expertise, which has translated into the kind of the rebirth of our CAB, thanks to the leadership of April and April Burns-Norris and Kanitha. And so that's been really exciting. We're trying to interject funding and energy into that as well, obviously surrounding our staff and surrounding them with our staff. Bigger picture, our COC, with oversight by the Office of Homeless Services, the then mayor of Nashville and the Metro Council made a historic investment of $50 million in American Rescue Plan funds, which was 2 years ago, I believe. And it's still in place and will be for the next couple of years. And there was $9 million for interim gap housing, $9 million for supportive services, $7 million for landlord engagement capacity building, and then an additional $25 million that's is being managed by the Public Housing Authority for development gap funding. So this was an amazing investment for the community, and it's unprecedented, and it's brought together like an unprecedented collaboration of services and community, and it's something that April is really working on. But while this is great, they don't last forever, and that's the key focus for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Kanitha, we're going to come back to you. What are you hearing around the mindset of the community of purpose, people with lived expertise, around preventing end homelessness? And what are you hearing about folks wanting to join, or is there conversations around folks wanting to join the work, and what's a good starting place for them to start?
Thank you for that, Albert. And really, again, how I was speaking about the cab, that's where we meet people on the ground. And I feel like the people, they trust their peers, and I feel like the ones that would bridge that gap that is also stereotypical to the providers, because I feel like it's a way to segue into that relationship just by having that lived experience in place. And people feel kind of transactional when they're, being handled by different services, and everybody's experience is different, but I feel like the key to it is being able to have that listening ear. But I want to kind of grab what April said about even with their different positions, we all have something to do and carry, right? And so when it gets overwhelming on that side, I feel like we have that empathy and that we've gone through the trauma, so therefore I can really empathize with you when I've gone through it. Not saying that other people have not. I'm not saying that, but it's just that level of I can, just for an example, like the cab meeting, it was a situation where you can have different things like community agreements and things of that nature where we're not talking over each other, or that type of thing. And with it being the first time that we were in that space, I feel like it was such a mutual respect from everybody of how it flowed. And they don't know me from Adam, so they really were very, even though it was very passionate in there, everybody had that mutual respect for each other, and that is key to community, and that is what is going to rebuild us. That bridging the gap between that. April tells me all the time, she's like, you speak about the technical divide and also the lived experience divide. I feel like this relationship here that's at this panel is what's going to bring that together into restored hope. And like Bill said, I had it in my bio about the rebirth. And that's why I was kind of smiling when you said that, because it brings it full circle back around to we're being rebirthed together. And even though OHS is a baby, they're 8 months old, so we're all, I feel like, at a new fresh point to start and be able to grow together, and then bring in these people that change the dynamic of, change the narrative of how people feel about services, because utilizing us will change that, and be able to echo what they're feeling and be able to translate it back to the providers, and everybody's helping each other.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next question for April. April, with this new initiative that the Consumer Advisory Board will be working on, there's a lot of forward-facing approach that we're looking to do to move the work further out into the community, have it more community-based led, but also nestled within program planning spaces and other spaces with the homeless services. In relation to that collaboration, what's the importance, or how does a homeless service team leverage those voices within those spaces once we start pushing further out, and how do we start bringing people to those services and better navigating what can help them be more sustainable?
So I have a couple of questions for the audience before I answer that. I just want to know who's in the audience. How many people here have lived experience? Will you raise your hand?
Wow.
How many people are frontline staff? Are there any leadership or CEOs, executive directors in this room? Wonderful, wonderful.
Three. I'm all three.
Kanika said she's on 3. She's on 3. So, thinking about your role and embedding yourself in the voices, and with the people, that's the only way that you can really help leverage their voice or help amplify their voice. On purpose, I hang out with my outreach team from time to time if they're hosting a resource fair or if we're in an encampment. Just because you're the executive director doesn't mean you sit behind the office. That's why I can't answer emails that often. But I would much rather be with the people. So just know that no matter your role, if you're not keeping your ear close to the people that you are centered for, then your level of work or the work that you're working on is a little bit far removed as well. I think that I heard during the, you all know the snowfall. I don't know if every community called it the snowfall, but the supplemental notice of funding that came out for sheltered and unsheltered and rural areas. We had a lot of listening sessions then, and during one of the listening sessions, I heard 2 powerful things that our community actually spoke of differently. So if you, before COVID, so of course we have that BC before COVID, right? I can help myself. Before COVID, we had a lot of advocates that said, people don't want housing. Don't force people into housing. Don't close camps. And as we were hosting listening sessions with people that lived outdoors in the encampments, they were all saying, we do want housing. When are you going to move us in? How soon can this happen? The only difference is they just don't want the preconditions that may come along with the formative housing that we used to know of. And so that was very powerful. They sat there at the table and, doubled down against advocates saying, we do want housing. Don't say that we don't. Another thing that I heard during that session which was new to me, because before COVID, we worked closely with MNPD because we were a metro department, but not too close. So if we were in an encampment, or if we went to a shelter, or if we were actively involved in a situation or happened upon someone, our outreach team did not work with MNPD. And actually, there were some groups that would hold up signs and say, defund MHEAD, because that was our title back then, because we worked with MNPD. And during that snowfall conversation, we heard over 3 out of the 7 people there, the others nodded their head, and they said, we like when MNPD comes to our area. We know we're safe. They bring water to us. Our MNPD officers are considered quality of life teams or community engagement officers. So even if it's a tough situation, they would call Heather, our outreach team member, or Lakeisha, or any of our outreach team members to come help walk them through a process. And so to hear that their voices were actually different than over 25 years, what I even helped to pass along throughout the community, and help amplify. I'm not saying it was a false narrative, but people change, situations change, and I even think MNPD and or housing opportunities becoming a housing first community. So along with that change, you have to also understand that the stance that you normally would take on a situation or the way that you normally would solve a problem probably has changed as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, April. Really appreciate that. Bill, I'll ask you a question about resources in new spaces. So we know that there's existing spaces where resources are already allocated. But as the community or the CAB starts to develop new spaces around building power and building voices in those spaces, how do we get resources to those spaces to continue the sustainability of that work in those spaces?
That's a good question. But I think that we do have the funding, and I think, I didn't know, at first when Albert said, we'd like you to come speak here, and I was like, I've only been there 11 months, what could I offer, to be honest, and he and April kind of explained to me that my role is unique in the way that I interact with the rest of the team and the community. And I didn't know that. I've been on the other end when I was trying to get funding. There was always some department that stood in the way of getting the work done, right? And I don't want to be that, right? I want to empower and foster. And so April has allowed me to be on the leadership team where, we talk about the funding, we talk about the projects and priorities, and that leads to the growth here with Kenitha and April Burns-Norris and that effort as well as all the others. We're braiding their expertise into processes to build out the spaces of critical need, including like the recruitment of more people with lived experience and expertise into roles of leadership, obviously. But we also have processes that we're trying to move forward on for the COC, like the CE assessment tool, right? And we know that getting their, invaluable feedback and their experience and their expertise is going to be vital to the success of that CE assessment tool as we move forward. With all that said, I think the funding is there, the critical spaces and need are there, but we need to do a better job, like April talked about, of bringing people with lived experience into those spaces, into the equations, and into those roles. We know it's vital to help them find their way to help their unhoused, our unhoused neighbors in a way that only they can do. And we are also working with them to build a community of peer support with people with lived experience and guiding them to getting the state designation, the certification for the peer support. So those are some of the things we're trying to do and trying to get the resources to those spaces.
Awesome. So Kenitha, I'll come back to you. How do you see your work taking a forward-facing approach and moving further out into the community, and how do you bring in folks with lived expertise as leaders?
Wow, yeah, oh, that's a good one. So for me, I feel like it's what we're doing right now. That's number one, the relationship between Office of Homeless Services, National Alliance to End Homelessness, each other. And for me, I honestly, I love to do leadership development, and I want to see anyone that comes under my tutelage, if you will, or in contact with me at all, I want them to exceed me. That's not a bad thing. You want to see people grow bigger and better and grow right into their purpose of what they are meant to be. So I feel like this is the exact way to make it forward facing by allowing us to be who we are as lived experience, authentically, and just bring that. I feel like it's honestly magic that we have that is just really, I don't want to say ignored, but just you didn't know. So it's just simply, and I feel like that's with everybody. So we have to get to know the magic inside of each other, and that's forward facing for me.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for that. So I'll go to April again. And April, there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle that you probably umbrellas. But as a person with lived expertise in this movement you're trying to build in Nashville, how do you connect all the pieces to the puzzle together to make sure, like the program planning space, the service navigation, systems integration, emergency crisis, and diversion all see the same dream that you see?
Well, that takes a talent, right? It takes a whole community. I think in our work, I always think of like, how are we pulling the community along with us? How are we pushing the system? How are we encouraging everyone to be bigger, better, bolder, faster? How are we leading with urgency? Now, I know my team gets tired because I talk about leading with urgency all the time, and we are always moving, going. There's always something to be done, but I think, and I say, sometimes we're going to have to be okay with being uncomfortable because there are people that are living outside uncomfortably every day. And that's one of our mottos that we talk about weekly, bi-weekly, whenever we're meeting. The magic sauce here is when we have public, private, philanthropic, faith-based, lived experience, oftentimes all sitting at the same table. And what we strongly encourage is open, candid conversations. The narrative can't be driven by one voice. And probably what you all see in your community is there's maybe 1 to 4 loud voices that typically drive the conversation, halt progress. And what we need would be people just like you that are sitting here listening, learning. What can I do differently? How can we help our system to speak up? Because a lot of times, what's happening is it's halting progress. You operate like as a status quo. Right now, we've watched each level of system delivery through Office of Homeless Services lens. But what we're noticing is, even when we are living out loud publicly and explaining how we're working with 3 to 4 developers and bringing housing on, service providers sometimes are still operating with a scarcity mindset. I heard another speaker present about this yesterday. For many, many years, this field has been severely underfunded for many years. And so when you have nothing, you oftentimes don't even have the ability to dream or reimagine. And that's what I want us as a department to be able to help our community with, is to be able to dream and reimagine. To be able to reach across the table to another metro department, even if it's MNPD. Connect with the philanthropic community. Because I don't know if you all know it, but the philanthropic community is watching. And I've had meetings with several of them, and they say things to me like, well, you guys don't get along. Because all they see is maybe the fighting. Or how do I fund this space when everyone's not behind the initiative? Because they see the divisiveness. Not everyone is using that HMIS system, so you don't have a good thumb on the pulse of homelessness. So how do you create solutions, innovative, creative solutions to help with bridging that gap? And for us, that means we go straight to the source and we address the issue. Like right now, we are working with the largest shelter provider in Nashville. They house almost 1,000 people per night. And they were not using HMIS. For 10 years, there's been a conversation with them, for 10 years. And I'm proud to say, we're only 8 months old, guys. So this work and that relationship building started long before I, moved into this seat. But as a department, we didn't take no for an answer. And we signed an MOU this week while I was here. And sometimes it takes funding, right? We had to agree to pay for that bridging of the gap and syncing the data. And it's okay, because if you're wanting to go after robust funding, that's one of the puzzles that I have to help create for Bill. How do we get all of that data? How do we make sure that the data lives in one place? How can we pull reports? Now, on the other side of building that bridge and putting that puzzle together, you have to know there are some other consequences, right? So bringing in 1,000, data points per night will shift your data, and you have to be okay with that. Because you would want to know the true level of homelessness, what's truly going on in your city, how much funding do you really need, what advocates do you really need at the table, what other sectors are you underutilizing, whether it's the faith-based or, recovery and addiction services. You would rather know all of that information. So do not be afraid to be courageous.
Thanks very much. And this question actually follows your question, April, for Bill, because there's going to be a lot of support that's needed to make sure that this work can continue and that the voices of folks with lived expertise has a carved out space in this work. But Bill, I want to ask you, where do you think the internal resource investment should be allocated within the structure of the COC system to ensure collaboration continues